My name is Dana Cisco. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent most of those years as the quietest person at every family dinner, and the only one who pays the bill. Last Saturday morning, before I'd even finished making the coffee, my sister texted me, "Send me $7,200 for my daughter's 16th birthday." The pictures were below. A rented ballroom decorated with dangling lights, a long dress hanging on a hanger, and a 700 cake shaped like a collection of gift boxes. I looked at my phone as if I needed an explanation. But it wasn't the text message that broke me. What my father said 10 minutes later was, "And what you quietly did that night at 7:30 the next morning, none of them saw." Welcome back to Quiet Drama Tales, where the quietest woman at the table is often the one who manages the finances. If the idea of a family that only calls when they need money sounds familiar, please leave a comment and subscribe to the channel, because this story begins with a cake and ends with an accounting ledger. And I want you to watch every episode. I read the message 3 times, and each time I read it the same way, from bottom to top, looking for the sum. That's what makes an auditor's job so special. Others see a sum, but I see a number that must have a source, and I always know the exact source of the account. My sister, Tammy, sent the entire message to the family group, not to me specifically, which made it almost like a separate message. The picture of the meeting place was accompanied by a caption, "Maya deserved it," then the dress, then the cake decorated with a tiny heart, as if the heart made the 700 even sweeter. My mom responded within a minute, 3 rounds of applause, and it was absolutely wonderful. My aunt Denise sent a string of hearts. No one asked how to pay, because in my family, that question has always had one answer, and it's always me. I put my phone down on the table and let my coffee finish. I told myself to take a deep breath and not do what I always do, start solving it before I've decided it's my responsibility to solve it. Because that wasn't explicitly stated in the group chat. This wasn't the first time a picture had appeared in front of an account. And it wasn't the 10th time either. Tammy doesn't send prices. She sends pictures and lets the pictures speak for themselves. By the time the conversation turns to money, the deposit is already paid. The only remaining question is who will pay the rest. I pick up the phone again, $7,200 for a 16-year-old girl's birthday party. Somewhere beneath my ribs, silent accounts from a decade ago begin to accumulate, whether I like it or not. You have to understand how something like this works, because nobody issues a bill for 10 years straight. The bill only comes once. The first bill I remember was for Tammy's car transmission, when Mia was 6 years old, and the car broke down in a grocery store parking lot in February. $900 that time alone. Then there was the security deposit when she left. Then a phone bill he swore he'd pay by the 15th. Then a credit card with a balance exceeding $4,000 without her knowledge. Each one arrived the same way, urgent, small enough to make you feel inferior enough to refuse. Wrapped in the phrase, "You're the only one I can ask for it." And I was. I always have been. I was transferring money before I felt its impact, because feeling it would have meant acknowledging a pattern, and acknowledging a pattern meant I had to do something about it. So I didn't calculate it. That was my entire strategy, so to speak. I kept my receipts in a file I never opened. Like a smoke alarm, they haunted me. At some point during those years, I started registering a few things in my name. A deposit here, a container there. Just so you wouldn't lose your place, Dana. You'd get it back. I never got it back. But I never asked for it either, and that silence was mine, not hers. I was the one fixing things. The feeling of fixing things made me feel loved. And I never allowed myself to wonder what would happen to me, or how much that house would be worth if I stopped fixing it. People assume I paid for it because I owned it, and that's the easy way to explain it. Let them think so. But that's not the truth. The truth is smaller and worse. I paid the price because, by paying, I became valuable. I grew up as the eldest sister in a home where money was scarce and love was hard to come by. At some point, I learned that the only way to be wanted was to be useful. Tammy was the one people worried about. I was the one they depended on. They are not the same. The second thing is more solitary than it seems. When you're the trusted one, no one looks at you. They only look at whether you're available. So, I made myself available. I paid the deposits. appointed someone to hold the file, and kept it locked, because as long as I was the one holding everything, I never had to know if they would like me if I left it aside. That was the unspoken agreement I made. And here lies what I learned after a bitter experience. The sentence I would inscribe in the file if I ever opened it: love that maintains balance is not love. But love that doesn't achieve this balance is not secure. I spent a decade so afraid of the first half that I never saw the second. I told myself the scrutiny would be harsh, the count unfair. Real families don't scrutinize each other's finances. And the family that raised me with this belief was ready to send a bill for $200 and call it a birthday present. The watch was something no one in my family knew about because I hadn't told them. Telling them would have seemed like showing off. In my family, boasting publicly is only allowed if it's about someone else. 2 weeks ago, I finally started the process of renting an apartment. Not a big one, just a 2-bedroom one on the east side of Columbus, with a leak under the kitchen sink and a view of a parking lot. To me, it was like a cathedral. I'd been renting since I was 22. I've been saving to buy a house since I was 26 in a separate account that I've never used. It's the only account in my life that doesn't require any withdrawals. My loan officer was very clear: keep your savings as they are. Don't take on new debt. And don't withdraw large sums before completing your transactions. In other words, don't blindly follow my family's teachings. To them, I was the sister with the prestigious job, the one who was achieving success. Success was just a mask I wore as long as they believed it was part of me. They didn't see the billboard with the $sign and the specific job title. They didn't realize that $7,200 wasn't an honor I earned. It was the difference between signing the contract in March and starting from scratch. That would have come directly from that one confession, the one that was supposed to be the first thing in my entire life, that belonged to me alone. And I think that's what finally opened the door for me. Not the cake, not even the number. The fact that they, unknowingly, opened the very drawer I'd spent 8 years learning how to keep locked. So I called Tammy and kept my cool, because I've learned that the calmer I seem, the more space people give themselves to be honest. Out of pure curiosity, I asked her about the actual budget, not to argue. I repeated the question a couple of times, to get the full picture. There was a brief silence, the kind that happens when deciding how much something will cost. Why does it matter? Family takes care of family, Dana, she said. That's what we do. And therein lay the core of my family's religious beliefs, encapsulated in a single sentence, spoken with a gentleness that bordered on wisdom. Family takes care of family. This doesn't mean we all take care of each other, but rather that those who can afford it do so, and those who can't. Everyone calls it love, so there's no need to call it by its real name. I asked again, more gently, how much is the wedding venue? How much is the dress? What's been agreed upon already? Tammy sighed as if I were the one suffering the most. You paid a deposit for the venue, remember? Back in the fall. So really, it's not that much anymore. I sat there completely still. I remember it like a dream come true. A quick service in October. I read a card number over the phone so Mia wouldn't miss her appointment. She'll get her money back, she said. Of course, I replied. Then, as usual, I closed the file. I forgot about it like one forgets a broken piece until they touch it. And now I've touched it, and I realize I had no idea, absolutely no idea, about how many other things in this family had silently linked my name to the final outcome. I put down the phone and sat with October. It slowly came back, the way these things do once you stop denying them. Tammy called, breathless, on Tuesday night, saying that the ballroom Lamia had wanted for her 16th birthday had gone to someone else, and that the manager needed a reservation card, or it would sell out. She didn't have a suitable card. Mum's was full, Dad's was worthless, and I was the one calling, because I always did. I read my ticket number on the back in the middle of a workday, because the alternative was wondering why my niece hadn't gone to her own party. It didn't feel like a decision, it was an involuntary reaction. That's how you get exposed, not through trickery, but in a fleeting, momentary way, so fleeting that saying, "No," makes you the villain in a story you didn't even know you were. I didn't ask about the deposit. I only discovered it now, As I flipped through my statements with the cold, professional caution I usually reserve for other people's books. $1,500 on my card, in my name, for a room I'll never dance in. If a deposit of $1,500 saved me from being caught in a suit, what must deposits be like? How many tiny strings were tied to the bottom of my receipts, while I kept my file closed and my mouth shut, convincing myself that not looking was the epitome of generosity. I opened my laptop. I hadn't opened the file yet, but I saw it there on the shelf for the first time in years. Before you judge Dad as knave, let me tell you what I saw 2 years ago, because it changed the way I hear his voice, even now. I went to the living room to look for a phone charger and found him on the small table under the window, wearing his reading glasses, holding a credit card statement that wasn't his. It belonged to Tammy. He was writing himself a check from the retirement account that was supposed to last him and my mother a lifetime. He did it as if he were paying a ransom, quickly and quietly, hoping no one would come in. He looked at me, but neither of us said a word. He simply tucked the statement under a magazine. I stepped back, and we never spoke of it again. My father, who always says that a family takes care of its members, is drowning in the same water he throws us into. He didn't establish this rule. It was his most senior and devoted servant. He grew up in a house even poorer than the one that raised us, where the only way to express love was to give money one didn't have. He carried that language with him every year of his life, as if it were the only language he ever spoke. He wasn't cruel, just afraid. He believed constantly that the day the Czechs stopped fighting would be the day his children would never return home. Knowing this, what he told me 10 minutes after the cake arrived was all the more poignant, because it came from a man drowning in despair, asking me to save him. That Saturday afternoon, I decided that this time would be different. And I want to be honest about how simple that decision was to me. It wasn't a sudden decision. It was the decision of a woman sitting at the kitchen table, repeating to herself, perhaps for the 40th time, that she was finally going to ask the difficult question aloud. I had made that decision before. I managed to transfer the money to the bank, deposit it, and pay the phone bill. Each time, the family took advantage of my vulnerability and pressured me to pay. But something about the cake, the word bank, the constant expectations, the way they treated me like a servant, not a sister, changed. I opened the chat group. I started typing. I didn't type no, 'cause I've learned that no only leads to arguments that eventually fizzle out. Instead, I typed a question. I asked to see the full budget details before anyone started talking about who was paying how much. A sensible question, the kind I'd ask a client, the kind any adult should be able to ask another adult without causing a scene. Then I sat there, my thumb on the small blue arrow, feeling as though my entire life depended on that button. If I pressed it, I'd lose all credibility. If I pressed it, I'd finally know if they wanted me or just my availability. My thumb hung there for a long time. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked indifferently. I cooled my coffee, then typed the message and sent it to everyone at once. I put my phone down and waited to get home. I got up to reply. Nothing happened for about 4 minutes. Those 4 minutes were the longest period of silence from my family in my life. Then the message bubbles started to appear, then they stopped, then they started again. 3 people typing at once, which is like a group chat room at a standstill. My Aunt Denise arrived first. Since when do we let each other fill out forms, Dana? Then my cousin, whom I haven't heard from since she needed a co-signer. Oh, it's your cousin! And then my mother, the peacemaker, sorting things out as usual. I'm sure Dana didn't think so, but I did. That's the whole problem. I asked a simple question, and the family reacted as if I'd stood up at a funeral and demanded to see the will. No one answered the question. You'll notice, no one sent a budget. In my family, a request for a number is never answered with a number. It's met with a feeling of immediate guilt, because the whole system depends on your lack of access to the accounts. The family helps each other. Don't make a big deal out of it. He's your cousin. Every message was like a hand patting my back, gently guiding me to my checkbook. And each one of them genuinely believed they were being fair, and that I was the one being cruel. That's what I finally understood, and I watched those bubbles burst. They hadn't lied to me. They'd been raised on the same principles I had. And to them, I hadn't asked a fair question. I'd violated a sacred question. I put my phone in a drawer, went for a walk I can't remember, and came back to find 11 new messages, one of them from a number that made me feel sick. The scene. I'll talk about the significance of the scene in a bit, because Tammy was the one who escalated the situation first. And I want you to see how she handled it. That's what truly demonstrates her authenticity. She didn't argue about budgets. Instead, she went straight to the weakest point in the room. One image ended the discussion. Mia stood in front of the examination room mirror, in her long dress, her hand on her hip, trying to look happy for the camera. But she didn't quite succeed. See below. I think I'll tell her the party's cancelled because her aunt wants a spreadsheet. She'll understand. She'll understand. A phrase designed to make me the woman who made a 16-year-old cry. And it worked, as always. My chest tightened. I clenched my thumb. For a full second I was about to send the money, but then the picture vanished. That's just how it is. Tammy doesn't come to you angry, she comes with a child, because a child is the one thing I've never been able to refuse in my life, and she knows it, she always has. But in that moment of anxiety, the checker in me did what it was trained to do, refused to sign anything just because someone was pressuring me. I looked at the picture again. Not at the dress, but at Mia's face. And Mia, my bright and perceptive cousin, didn't look like a girl afraid of missing a party. She looked like a girl afraid of what she was putting on for the adults around her. That was the first moment in the story they told me. And in that moment, I stopped wondering if I could handle the party, and started wondering who it was really for. The next morning, I drove to Millage to see my mother, thinking she would be the one to stay with me. And I want you to understand that I truly believed it, until I discovered otherwise. Millage is about 40 minutes from my apartment. It's a small town with a good restaurant and several empty shops. A place where everyone knew their children were safe. My parents still lived in the house where I grew up. I walked in and found my mother at the sink. Before I could even sit down, she said, without turning around, I saw the conversation. I told her I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, and that I couldn't go on like this. It was bigger than she could imagine, and I needed her by my side. She dried her hands very slowly. You've always been strong, Dana, she said, and I mustered my courage. In my family, strength is never a compliment, it's a duty. You're stronger than your sister, you always have been. Would it hurt you to solve this? Just this once, just this once. Even Mom. Even the one who was supposed to be fixing things carried a checkbook instead of her usual calm demeanor. And in that kitchen, I realized that peace in this family always meant Dana paying alone. She wasn't being harsh in her request. She seemed tired and a little scared. And I thought she was asking me to be generous. But she was asking me to pay her a deposit for my entire future, so she wouldn't have to sit in a room where her daughters were fighting over money. I left before I could say a word I couldn't take back. I headed home, knowing I'd be doing everything I was going to do later on my own. Mia was sitting on the porch doorstep when I came out, waiting for me. Something she wouldn't have done if she'd just wanted a ride. They're 15, 11, and 12 years old. All of them have elbows and eyeliner, and an alertness that painfully reminds me of myself at that age. I sat down next to her on the cold concrete. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, without looking at me, "You don't have to pay, Aunt Dana." I asked her what she meant. She fiddled with the hem of her sleeve. A party. I know it's expensive. I heard my mother talking on the phone. She told me she didn't even want the ballroom. She might have wanted a group of friends, a patio, and some light, but not the 400-person guest list her mother had compiled from her aunts, cousins, and colleagues. People Mia had never even met. This isn't really for me, she said, and said it bluntly. That way of saying something you've known for ages, and then completely giving up on it, wasn't right. My 15-year-old niece calculated what took me 34 years and a file full of bills to tally. The party wasn't a birthday celebration. It was my sister's attempt to prove her love to a family that measures love in terms of money. And Mia would become the pretext for a bill she never asked for. I put my arm around her, and she let me, something she rarely does these days. As I sat on those cold steps, I made a different decision than the one I'd made in the car. I wasn't going to protect the group, I was going to protect the baby, and I began to realize that those two things were completely different. I couldn't sleep that night. So, I did what I'd been avoiding for 10 years. I took the file off the shelf. If your phone only rings when someone needs a check, you know exactly that feeling. That dread of finally getting hold of something you've spent years trying to avoid ever having to look at. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been the one who always paid? Then follow me, because by subscribing you'll find out the total amount. The file was huge. Bank statements, screenshots, and some handwritten documents I owed us years ago. Back when Tammy was still causing trouble with her pretensions. I made coffee in the middle of the night, like younger women do, and opened a new spreadsheet. Because a file is a feeling, a spreadsheet is a fact, and I was done feeling about it. Column A in date, column B in purpose. Column C in amount, column D in refund, and column D will be very lonely. I started this process on February 8th of this year with the 900, and I've kept track of it line by line, refusing to deal with anything or write down any numbers. The insurance deposit, the phone bills, the doubled amount, the credit card check I wrote the summer Mia broke her arm. The car loan that became another car. The meeting was held in October. Rows upon rows, each row small, each row wrapped in the same insistent kindness, each row sealing my file tightly. At 1 o'clock in the morning, I stopped typing and just looked at the total in the corner of the screen. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to scroll down and see the rest. When I finally could see everything, the total was 41,000. The 41,360 over 10 years and some months. Not a single dollar was mentioned in column D. I sat under the blue screen light and didn't cry, because crying is an emotion, so I kept it to myself all night. I simply asked for it. Do 40,000 for a used car, paid in cash. That's enough to pay for 2 years of schooling for a child. That's about the down payment on a 2-bedroom apartment with a leak under the sink. Once, in an emergency, I gave my family a house I'd never live in, for 900. I did it so quietly that they started to think the money had appeared out of nowhere. The way the rain appeared, and the way I appeared when they called me. And here's what the record of events taught me, what no feeling ever could. I didn't help them. Helping has an end. Helping makes you stronger, then you withdraw. What I did had no defined end, because I never wanted it to end. The end would have meant discovering my true self to these people, when I didn't pay. I financed a lifestyle I called love. They accepted it and called it the same thing. That word defined our relationship for a decade. Love that maintains balance isn't love. But love that never re-evaluates balance isn't secure. Finally, I understood the whole thing. I was in the kitchen at 1 in the morning, staring at the number I had dreaded so much. And I knew, that the diagnosis was correct. Even before the doctor had finished speaking, and that the question was no longer whether I could continue paying. The question was what I would do with the 41,000 as proof. Something else the spreadsheet told me turned everything from a nightmare into a plan. As I reconstructed the spreadsheet line by line over the past year, I had to track down the original contracts to get the exact amounts. Then I saw the contract holder's name. The reservation for seat 1500 was on my card, with a confirmation number ending in my initials, because I read it aloud to myself. But it wasn't just the seat, it was the cake too. Tammy had put down a deposit at a bakery in October. When the first card was declined, she texted me frantically, and I just gave her my card for the reservation. 300. As for the dress, the 400 dress in the screening room photo, it was on installment at a store. The plan was in my name too. Of course, because you have a better credit history, Dana. They'll approve you. I leaned back in my seat. For 10 years, I'd felt like the family wallet. Passive, open on demand, something that dispensed money, but had no power. The guarantor did that, and in the midst of a decade of courtesies, I'd become the legally obligated party to the one I was ordered to finance. I could wear the gloves, which meant, as I slowly realized, with a cool, clean feeling like a pillar finally regaining its balance, that I could also take them off. I wasn't just paying for their choices. I was standing between them and their consequences. My name was the only thing holding this illusion together. The name I gave them without thinking is one you can take back. Before taking any rash action, I tried to act logically, because I want you to know I gave them a chance before opening any doors. The next day, I sent Tammy a genuine, calm message. The kind of message I'd send to a client whose numbers don't match. I told her I loved her and wanted Mia, and that I wanted her 16th birthday to be amazing. Then I offered her something I thought was more than fair. I said, let's sit down together, the two of us, and create a real budget, a budget that works for Mia and that you both can afford. I'll contribute a specific amount, a real figure that's public. As for the rest, we plan it honestly on paper. No more surprise deposits, no more relationships that turn into wild parties. Just two sisters and a spreadsheet they'd prepared. I read it twice before sending it out. And I remember feeling almost hopeful, because it was the most honest thing I'd said to my sister in years. It wasn't a flat no, but a different kind of agreement, a reasoned agreement, an agreement that truly mattered. I offered to be generous intentionally rather than set a trap. I reasoned that if she could see that I wasn't rejecting her, but simply the ambiguity, we could build something real out of this mess. I pressed send, then did what I always do after I've poured all my energy into something. I waited and told myself not to expect the worst. Because for another night I still believed the problem was that they didn't understand me. It hadn't occurred to me that they understood me so well, and that budgeting for my family wasn't the answer. It was humiliating. Tammy called instead of texting, which she only does when she wants me to hear her voice trembling, and her voice trembled just in time. There she was. I'm an online article now, she said. Your sister. I told him I hadn't said that. I'd said the opposite. Let's plan together, I'd said. Oh, together, she repeated, as if the word had a bad connotation. You want a date? You want me to explain my daughter's birthday to you like I'm applying for a loan? And that's when it all came out. All our differences were laid bare in a single phone call. For me, the budget was a symbol of respect. It meant I took it seriously enough to plan accordingly. For her, the budget was an accusation. Proof that I viewed family the way I viewed my clients, as pillars to be balanced rather than people to be loved. Real families don't do that, she said. Then her tears flowed. Real tears, not the ones she was putting on. Real families have no value. I didn't argue. There was nothing to argue with. She was serious from the start. Like me, she grew up in a home where accounting was the harshest thing one could do, and where the highest form of love was giving to the point of pain without expecting anything in return. For 10 years, I was the exception that proved her rule, the one who gave without expecting anything in return. And now I had taken a pencil, and to her, that pencil was a greater betrayal than any amount of money. She hung up before I could reply, and I sat there realizing that the reasonable door I had just opened had been slammed shut by her, and that there was no way I could remain the good sister. There was only one scenario, in which I remained merely a source of income for the family, or one in which I stopped altogether. Then the vendor started contacting me, and that's when the whole truth came out. The event had a deadline. Initially, the venue sent a friendly and professional email reminding Ms. Cisco that the full rental fee for the ballroom had to be paid within 72 hours to confirm the booking, and that the card would be automatically charged if payment wasn't received. The card in the file was mine. Then, the bakery texted me asking how much I owed on the cake. Then the store texted me asking for the final payment on the dress. All these messages were addressed to me, because they were all on my account, and none of them knew or cared that the party they were charging me for was the result of a fight I lost with my family. I know some of you are screaming into your screens right now. Don't pay. Sit down. Block everyone. Bear with me, it's not that simple. And what my dad said next is the only reason I finally gave in. If I hadn't done anything, the payment would have been deducted from my card within 3 days, directly from the credit I desperately needed to finalize the contract. And the party I never agreed to would have become a reality at my expense, whether I liked it or not. The genius of these things lies in their construction, even though no one builds them intentionally. Once I understood the trap, I was already caught, with the only key in my hand. I could have lost the apartment, and bought myself another decade of wallet life. Or I could have used the one power that distinguishes humankind, never owned a wallet at all. My phone rang in my hand as I was still checking my emails related to the incident. The word, Dad, appeared on the screen, and I knew before I answered that he was calling to lock the door I'd just found. My dad never raises his voice, and that's what makes him so moving. Because a man who never shouts makes you feel like you're the one at fault simply for being alive. Dana said in a tired, hot voice. The voice he uses to end things. This has gone too far. He didn't ask for my opinion. He didn't mention the budget I presented. Which means Tammy told him her version of events, and he accepted it wholeheartedly, as he always does, because she asks nothing of him but money. He understood money too. He explained the family situation to me, as if I were a child who had forgotten the rules. I was the eldest, and I had a prestigious job. That's what the powerful did. They took responsibility, balanced things, and celebrated Christmas. He said, "Your sister is suffering, but you aren't. It's not her fault nor yours. But it's important that you're the one who can do it." I'm silent. I've learned that silence makes people say their truest thoughts. And after a moment of silence, my father said what I'll hear for the rest of my life. His voice hasn't even changed. "This is the part I can't forget." He said it calmly, as if it were self-evident, as if it were an expression of love. "Pay up, Dana, or you're not part of the family. Pay up, or you're not part of the family." There it is, finally, he said it aloud. The price of my membership, finally written down by the man who taught me the value of money. I won't be hurt. I won't be disappointed. I'll leave, and everything will be lost. I paid $41,000 over 10 years to avoid what's called a waiver penalty. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I said, "Okay, Dad," in a voice so calm it surprised us both. Then I hung up, put the phone on the table, and sat down with a pure feeling I hadn't had in years, because he had just told me what my money had bought. Now I knew the price, and I finally decided it was too high. After a sentence like that, most people crumble. I'd like to tell you that I did it to become more famous. But I didn't. I did what I do at work when a number comes up that changes the entire audit process. I became very calm. It's a strange gift, the calmness of an auditor. When the noise is overwhelming, I calm down and separate the feeling from the image, seeing the truth behind the din. I sat at my desk, and that feeling came over me. My father had threatened to delete my picture. I had to make a decision within 3 days, and I was the only one who could. I pushed the feeling aside, pulled the picture to the side, and looked him straight in the eyes. If I had paid 7th or 200, this is exactly what I would have bought, not a party. Not Maya's happiness. Maya herself told me she didn't want it. I would have bought another contract like this. Another 10 years of unspecified services, another file that was never opened. Another late-night spreadsheet with a bigger, more specific figure than 41,000. My father didn't threaten me. He made me an offer. He explained the terms very clearly: keep paying, and you'll remain part of the family. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to complete the idea he'd started. What were the family fees required to join? What was this membership that could only be renewed with cash? I'd spent 34 years so afraid of deportation that I'd never even asked myself what would really happen. And as I sat there, as still as a balanced book, I finally asked. I didn't like the answer. But stillness isn't courage. And I have to be honest about the wall I'm about to face, because it's the real wall, the one behind all that money. When I first allowed myself to imagine that I was actually stopping, not paying, not reducing, not fixing, a question sprang up from a very old and deep place. It had nothing to do with the apartment. The question was, what do I care if I don't pay? For 10 years, paying the bills was all that defined my place in the family. That's how I knew my place during holidays, why I sat at the head of the table, why my mother described me as tough, and why my father trusted me enough to confide in me about his retirement. If I withdrew the money, honestly, I didn't know how much I would have left. Would they contact me again? Would I still have a chair? Or was it that, with all my abilities, I feared what Tammy feared, not being liked, and simply chose a more respectable way to get out of this situation? This was the hardest thing I saw that week, harder than the 41,000, harder than my father's punishment, I realized that my quiet generosity wasn't at odds with Tammy's need. Her wound was the same, but cloaked in a more beautiful way. She found love through receiving, and I found it through giving. We never believed in the possibility of being loved unconditionally. And the only way I could know if these people loved me, not just my money, was to remove the money from the table and see who else was standing there. This was the most difficult audit I've ever done, and my account was the only one that was audited. So I went back to the only source I truly trusted, the exact terms and conditions, and read every single clause of the contract, line by line, just as I should have on the day I signed it. The venue agreement was clear. The deposit secured the date, and the remaining balance had to be paid 72 hours before the event, or upon my written request, whichever came first. The seller had the right to cancel the booking and forfeit the deposit if the remaining balance wasn't paid. Simply put, I could have canceled. The date was booked on my card, meaning the reservation would continue or end with my approval. If I had called before depositing the remaining amount, I could have canceled. I would have lost the $1,500 security deposit I paid in October. That money would have been lost anyway, but I would have prevented the remaining hall payment from being deducted from my account. The same applies to the cake. The down payment was lost, and the account was settled. The dress was being paid for in installments. I could have simply stopped, lost what little I had left, and paid no more. Adding up all the payments, the total down payments in my name amounted to approximately $7,200, which my sister had asked me to transfer. I had the right to decide whether the money would remain in my account or hers. But there was a condition, and that's why, like any sane person, I couldn't sleep without it. The 72-hour period specified by the venue had already begun, and their email stated that the remaining balance would be automatically deducted from the registered card upon expiry. Had I waited just one more day to consider the matter, the payment system would have made the decision for me, with no regard whatsoever for my family. That was the part beyond my control. The question isn't whether I can act, but how little time I have left. I can stop this, but not before tonight. Not tomorrow. Not after another conversation. Not after another attempt at understanding. Tonight or the party is mine forever. I dropped the contract. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 11. Then I picked up the phone. Before I called, I allowed myself to face the true cost, because I'm not reckless, and it will cost me an unpredictable amount. It wasn't a deposit. I've already accepted the loss. That's all there is to it. The moment I cancel these reservations, the secret will be out. Everyone will know that the venue, the cake, and the dress were all paid for with my card the whole time. It was Dana, that silent, hidden martyr, who financed it all behind the scenes. The mask will be removed. Not the mask of a villain, but the mask of a saint. For 10 years I hid the amount I paid. I convinced myself that I was hiding it out of humility. But that wasn't the whole truth. I kept it a secret because being the anonymous donor gave me a sense of both comfort and security. I felt needed without being seen, generous without being vulnerable. Withdrawing support meant stepping aside. It meant standing in the kitchen tomorrow. Being seen not as a mysterious source of money, but as someone with boundaries, someone who could be hurt. A person who had been bleeding silently for a decade finally spoke out. It wasn't the Wonders 500 itself that caught my attention, but the price. Holding the phone, I realized that this was precisely what I had paid my whole life to avoid, and that the file had remained closed all those years for the same reason, because an open file is a visible one, and a visible woman can be judged. But she was also capable of fame. I didn't allow anyone in my family to know me. I only allowed them to exploit me. Finally, it was time for me to know who they really wanted. At 11:04 p.m. on a Tuesday, I called the pub's emergency line, and a sullen young man named Kevin answered. I want you to know that the most important turning point in my life happened in a conversation with someone named Kevin, who seemed to have been on something. I gave him the confirmation number. I gave him my name, the name on the card, and the name on the reservation, and then I stated the penalty. I was requesting 10 years in prison and a $41,000 fine. I had to cancel everything. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. He read me the terms. The deposit was non-refundable. The reservation would be cancelled immediately. The appointment would revert to the open calendar. I said I understood and agreed. He paused for a moment, then said, "Okay, Mom, it's cancelled. You'll receive a confirmation email." He went back to his sandwich, and the ballroom reservation vanished. I called the bakery and left a message to cancel the cake. I logged into the store's account and stopped the payment. 3 actions, maybe 11 minutes in total, a decade of a certain version of me, all ended in the time it takes to heat dinner in the microwave. I placed my phone on the table. My hand was shaking, which surprised me, because inside I felt a strange, profound stillness. The silence of something that had finally ceased to hold together. I had just lit a fire I couldn't extinguish in a family that would consider it arson. In the morning, everyone will know there is no room for politeness, no room for leniency, and no room for silence. The file is now open, and it is open to everyone. And for the first time in my adult life, I have no desire to close it. I did one last thing before I went to sleep, and it was the quietest, coldest, and most polite thing I have ever written. I opened the family chat group, the same one the cake had arrived in 2 days earlier, and wrote them a short message. I told them I was canceling all my reservations that night. Tickets, venue, cake, and dress. Because they were all registered in my name and I couldn't keep them. I told them I loved Mia and wasn't going to explain it over text. I said I'd be at my mom and dad's house the next morning at 7. If they wanted to talk to me about anything, I'd be there. So I printed out the spreadsheet. The whole thing. Every single row. 10 years, 41360. Column D is the date it was created. I put the pages in a plain paper folder. Actually, the same folder I emptied and put next to my keys so I wouldn't forget it the next morning, even though it was impossible for me to forget it. I didn't mention it out of embarrassment. I wanted to clarify because it's important. I mentioned it because I'm no longer the only one in the family who knows the truth. For a decade, I've protected them from a certain number. Tomorrow, I'll place that number on their kitchen table and make it a reality for them, just as it has always been for me. I turned off the light. I hadn't slept well, and somewhere in Millage, an automated system sent out a cancellation notice that would arrive in my sister's mailbox at either a completely inconvenient time or a perfectly appropriate time. By 7:30 the next morning, everyone would know. I arrived at my parents' house at 60:50 because I'm never late for anything. I sat in the driveway sipping coffee at the petrol station when I saw the kitchen light come on. Tammy's car was already there. Of course it was. She would pull up as soon as my message arrived to coordinate with Dad, so she'd be there before me, as usual. I gave myself another minute in the car. Then I took the file and went inside. I had barely closed the door behind me when Tammy's phone, which was on the kitchen table, lit up. The screen lit up and I saw her reading the message at the same time. Email. Subject: your meeting has been cancelled. Timey 7:28. Tammy picked up the phone. There was something on her face I'd never seen before. She was overcome with a feeling of confusion and horror within 2 seconds. "What's this?" she said. It wasn't a question in the literal sense. The reservation had been cancelled. It said, "Reservation cancelled." She looked at me, and my father looked up from his coffee, while my mother froze at the counter with a kitchen towel in her hand. For a long moment, the entire kitchen fell silent as the truth was revealed at exactly 7:30, just as I had predicted. "Dana, what have you done?" My father said very slowly. "I left the keys." I placed the file on the table, closed, right on the edge, as if I had arranged everything. I said in a low voice, "I cancelled the reservations that were in my name. Guys, last night, the kitchen exploded. But I want you to notice something about that moment, because I noticed it when it happened. I was the only person in that room who wasn't scared. For the first time in my life in that house, I knew all the numbers on the table, while they had just discovered there was a table at all. Tammy came to me first, and as usual, she came with strength, moisture, and confidence, so I let her go. She cried, "You've ruined everything? You waited until the last minute and ruined your niece's birthday to start a fight because you're sad. Because you're lonely. Because you can't stand seeing anyone happy." My father stood up. "Enough, both of you." But he looked at me when he said it, not her. And I realized then that in this kitchen, you were always talking to me alone. My mother was already crying, calling my name like a prayer. Dana, my darling, we can fix this. We can still fix it. And the word fix? That my mother uttered was the final push I needed, because I knew exactly who she meant. She meant me. It was always about me. I never raised my voice. I never raised my voice in that house my whole life. And I didn't want to start the morning not being afraid of him at last. I waited until the noise stopped, until Tammy started breathing heavily, Dad's face turned red, and Mom put her hand over her mouth. Then I placed 2 fingers on the paper file and moved it to the center of the table. Before anyone could say another word about the reforms, I said, I want everyone to see what we've actually accomplished in 10 years. No one touched it, so I opened it myself. I flipped through it so they could read it clearly and arranged the pages. 10 years of my family's love, given away on a coin they swore we'd never count. Love that maintains balance isn't love, I told myself for years, but love that doesn't achieve balance isn't secure. Finally, it did. And there was the number that had been hidden inside the word all along, though 41,360. An empty column and 4 pale faces in a kitchen that had insisted for a decade that we were that worthless family. This is where I could have won and lost the whole war with a single sentence, and I want you to understand that I felt like both paths were open to me at the same time. I could have closed the case. I could have apologized, said I overreacted, and that I would pay the 7,201 last time and forget about it all. If that would have brought me immediate comfort in that kitchen, I would have retained my position, my title, and my father's approval. I would have returned strong, the perfect girl, and wealthy. That path was open to me. It would have cost me everything, but it would have restored everything to its former state. But I refused it. Instead, I looked at my sister, whose face was bruised, and said the truth I knew. Tammy, I paid for everything. The venue, the cake, the dress. It was all on my card the whole time. Every single line on these pages is me. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because I love you so much I can't keep lying to you over and over again about what I did. My father made a sound as if he wanted to speak, so I continued. I remained silent, still composed. I said, I'm not canceling the date because I don't love Mia anymore, but because I've finally started. That sentence cost me dearly. I saw it cast a shadow over everyone. My mother's face fell, my father turned away, Tammy's mouth fell open in silence, and worst of all Mia, who came down the stairs at one point and stood in the doorway, listening to everything, her eyes brimming with tears. And I didn't back down. It was a choice, not a cancellation, not a refusal to back down. Every cell in my body, 34 years of training, was screaming at me to ease the burden, to mend their faces, to stop their pain as I always do. And I stood there and let them suffer, because the alternative was to keep us all sick and call it peace. I won. I felt every moment. When I finally spoke, it wasn't to apologize or make matters worse, but to draw the line I should have drawn 10 years and 41,000 ago. I said I won't do this again. No more surprise deposits. No more deposits in my name. I won't reveal that I paid for something after I've already paid for it. I looked at Tammy. But I won't abandon you either. If you want, we can sit down seriously and build a house for Mia that fits our budget. I'll put a clear amount of money on the table where you can see it. Not there. I'll never put it there. Tammy didn't answer. She was still in so much pain that she couldn't hear me offering her something better than money, which was true, a version of me that would truly last. My father went out the back door and slammed it shut. I let him go, because I finally realized he wasn't running from anger so much as he was running from something that frightened him. A daughter from whom my mother could no longer buy peace in a language she'd learned to speak only in this way. My mother sat heavily and buried her face in her hands. It wasn't a happy ending. I want to be honest about this. No one hugged me. No one told me I was right. I went into that kitchen and wrote the truth, and the truth did what the truth does, not comfort, but clarity. As I stood there amidst the ruins of a morning I had chosen myself, I felt something I had never felt in that house for 34 years. I felt as though I were standing there as myself. Not as the wallet, not as the middleman, not as the powerful figure, but simply as Dana. Finally and forever, just me. The weeks that followed were quieter than I had anticipated, and solitude-aire, and I won't pretend otherwise. My father didn't call me for a month, and when he finally did, it was a completely different story. Neither of us mentioned the kitchen, which is about as close to a truce as men like my father can offer. Two of my aunts stopped speaking to me altogether. The family communication system had done its work, and now, in many living rooms, I was the daughter who had abandoned her family for money. I let them think so. I'd learned that you can't fix a story in a house that requires you to be the villain. But here's what was really different. My savings were in their rightful place, safe and sound. My loan had closed in March. I signed the papers for the 2-bedroom house, with its leak under the sink and a view of the car park, and stood in the empty living room afterwards and ended up crying, not from sadness, but from the strange and exhilarating anticipation of a future that was already mine. Tammy threw a party in a brightly lit backyard, attended by about 30 of Maya's closest friends. By all accounts, it was the best night of the year for her. Tammy didn't invite me. It's a wound that's still slowly healing. But Mia did send me a picture of her. Even so, we weren't there. She and her friends were laughing under the lights. The sign read, "I wish you were here." I didn't pay a penny for that party. It was undoubtedly the greatest expression of love my family could give with so little money, and it made me understand the significance of spending $41 without fully realizing it. 4 months later, I received a message from Mia confirming that it had all been worthwhile. She got a part-time job at the movie theater and opened a savings account, her first, and wanted to know if Aunt Dana could teach her how to create one of those electronic spreadsheets. Because she was trying to plan a school trip and wanted to find the right number before asking her mother for anything. I read that letter standing in my kitchen, in my apartment, and then I sat down on the floor, because it was the end. It was like breaking a link in a chain that snapped prematurely. Mia will grow up knowing that love and budget aren't enemies. That you can look directly at a number and still be generous, kind, and family-oriented, and that maintaining balance isn't the opposite of love. This is what love does when it decides to stay. Tammy called me that same week, and for the first time I remember, it wasn't about money. My sister was telling me she was thinking of me. We don't get along. We may never be, but love that maintains a balance isn't love. Love that lacks balance is never safe. I finally figured out how to balance them. And, God willing, Mia will too. If you've ever been the family ATM, the one who always pays, who only calls when the card is declined, you know the truth. It cost me $41 to learn. The letter, the cake, the alarm, the one call in the middle of the night. Sometimes, no, is the most comforting word in the language. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments when was the last time you truly said, no. And subscribe to the Quiet Drama Stories channel to be the first to hear new stories.